Pick your fire number.
Pay off debt.
Avoid lifestyle creep.
Spend intentionally.
Increase your income.
Blah, blah, blah.
A lot of FI advice is pretty beige, I got to tell you. Colorful people like us need creative solutions to address our unique needs in order to get the same or even better results.
So today on Queer Money episode 325, we are digging deep to find 5 unique steps that LGBT folks can take to reach financial independence. Now, on with the show.
So as we said at the outset, a lot of the financial independence advice is pretty beige. It's very useful and it's necessary. It's not, we're not trying to discount it at all, but a lot of it, there are some unique needs for our community. Some communities don't have the threats that our community is facing today. So how do we factor that in if we do want to reach financial independence? Well, if you want more information on the basics, we encourage you to check out episodes 50, 80, 152, and 281 of the Queer Money podcast. And we'll continue to talk more about basics in the future. But today we're covering the more in-depth, unique topics that our community needs to start considering.
Right. I think when you think about our community, as well as some other marginalized communities or communities that have been left out of the financial conversation for a long time, we are in a catch-up game, right? And so we're trying to catch up when it comes to all things finance, really, but especially when it comes to working on financial independence. So we want to try to take advantage of as many things as possible to try to reach that. You know, we're covering today things that our community can do because when we look historically, we've been paid less, we have fewer protections, we have increased needs, especially when you think about healthcare. We're constantly seeing attacks, especially right now. John and I are recording this one day after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and the conversation that came out of that, we're getting attacks from the judicial branch of the federal government, and potentially, looking at the next presidential election. We just need to be doing a little bit more, right?
100%. And so that's exactly what we want to tackle today. And to be clear, for this episode, we're talking about financial independence. We're not talking about early retirement.
Right. Exactly.
That's a separate conversation. Some of the steps that we'll talk about today would apply if you're trying to reach early retirement, especially if you want early retirement, but if some of them won't apply after you would retire because it is contingent on having an employer. So to be clear, this episode is about financial independence. And as many of you know, we just published the Motley Fool Debt-Free Guys LGBTQ money study. And one of the biggest, most surprising factors that came out of that for David and me was it showed that our community is still not using the tools and resources that are available to most of us that help us reach financial independence or even financial security. And that must change. So to lay the foundation for this particular episode, before we go into the 5 steps, we want to talk about the need. The study showed that LGBTQ people are almost as likely, 36%, to have a crypto wallet as we are to have a retirement account, either through an employer or an individual IRA. And that's got to change. Contrary to popular belief, most millionaires don't inherit their money. They don't come into a windfall of cash. They don't murder somebody and steal their money. Most millionaires today got that way through having a company-sponsored retirement plan. At least 80% of millionaires that were surveyed a couple of years ago, they polled about 10,000 millionaires. 80% of them said that they got to that status by having a company-sponsored retirement plan. So to us, that's a critical component of reaching financial independence. So if you're not working for a company that has a company-sponsored retirement plan, we got to kind of either encourage them to do so, or we need to think about jumping ship and going somewhere that does offer that kind of a benefit. Or if very likely for many of us, if you're at a company that does offer a company-sponsored retirement plan, make sure you're using it. Don't miss this opportunity. Not only does it lower your taxes, but it can also open up the opportunity for you to also someday reach financial independence.
Yeah, and I think another point that we want to kind of pull from that study of 10,000 millionaires was that the vast majority of them, I think it was about 70%, did not make 6 figures while they were accumulating the money in their 401k that pushed them above that millionaire mark. And so it's really important, I think, because a lot of folks in our community community think that, well, we can't do that because we don't make enough money. Well, here's the examples of a lot of people who throughout the years did not make that kind of money, and they were able to put money into their 401k accounts. They took advantage of compound interest. They took advantage of the time value of money. And that's
Dollar cost
something that
averaging.
every single one of us can take advantage of as long as we're putting some money aside. One of the pro tips that we have here is to remember when you're doing your making your investments into an employer sponsored retirement plan, think about the difference between Roth IRAs and the potential to do a Roth conversion to allow yourself to have access to money that allows you to carry yourself a little bit further as soon as you're ready to retire, especially if you're deciding to retire age 59 and a half or before you reach full retirement age. So go back and listen to episode 308, where we talked about Roth conversion ladders and also the conversation a little bit around Roth. But I think that,
Can I stop you? Can you riddle me this? How old were we when we finally paid off our debt? Do you remember?
so that was in roughly 2008. I was probably 37, which put you probably at around 34.
So we were pretty much flat.
We were up a little bit
How
because
much did we
even
have?
during that time period, we did have an employer sponsored
Oh, right.
retirement plan, and we were contributing. Although some people would say this is not their choice, but John and I decided to scale back our investments in our 401k plan to the point where we were just getting the match. Instead of doing 7, 10, 15%, we scaled it back to, I think, 4 or 5%. And so we were still putting a little bit of money into our 401k plan.
So from the time we paid off our debt to the time that we reached millionaire status, how many years approximately would you say that was?
It was probably about 13 or 14 years.
Okay.
So I think we reached it sometime in I think 2021.
Okay. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of us are probably thinking, if you're listening to this in your mid 30s, mid 40s, well, I'm never going to be able to reach millionaire status. Well, if we were able to do it in 15 years, and then the opportunity is available to you. And I would argue that one of the reasons we were able to do that is because in markets like this, we would typically, historically, be buying. And this is a scary market to be in right now, that we don't know exactly if we're going to hit, if this is going to become a recession, or if this is just a correction. But now, for most people who are consistent investors, like we were once upon a time, we would be buying right now. The only reason that we're not buying stocks right now is because, as many of you know, we just bought an investment property and we're getting into real estate investing, and that's what our focus is. But if I just want to share that, because if we were able to do that in such a short duration, and we weren't necessarily consistent all the time, we had some hiccups, we scaled it back once in a while. We weren't perfect. We made a lot of mistakes. So if you could be better than us, you can maybe even reach that millionaire status more quickly than us.
Right. And also, just to point this out, at no point in our lives John and I have ever earned $100,000 as individuals.
Or more, yeah.
Right. And so, for us, again, similar to others, it was making sure that we were putting in 5 to 10, sometimes 15%, especially after we paid off our debt. We started to pour more money in. But I want to bring up another point about, and this is another kind of pro tip about employer sponsored retirement plans. A lot of people think that the only choices that they have are the mutual funds that are listed or the ETFs that are listed as choices. What is not often talked about is the option to have a self-directed 401k. Some plans, and I used to work for for a 401k record keeping company, and a lot of plans have this available. Not everyone, but a lot of plans, especially larger companies, have what's called a self-directed 401k option, which means instead of being locked into the mutual funds or ETFs that they've decided you need to pick from, which I will say sometimes have really high fees. The institutional shares are sometimes specifically set aside as ways to collect money out of 401k plans for the mutual fund companies. So they're sometimes charging you even a higher fee than if you were to buy that out on the open market on your own. But what a self-directed 401k plan allows you to do is it allows you to basically have a brokerage account that is attached to your employer-sponsored retirement plan, and it allows you to invest in whatever you want. So, for example, if you were to have your 401k through your employer, and they were having that taken care of by Empower Retirement, which is the company I used to work for. The Empower had options where you could invest with various brokerage firms that your company had picked. So, for example, if they wanted to invest through Fidelity, that would allow you to use a Fidelity brokerage account to buy whatever it is you wanted. So then you could purchase low cost ETFs or specific investments like ESGs, ones that are a little bit more on the socially responsible side. You can purchase those in your 401k. Do some research, talk to your HR department or your benefits department to make sure that you understand the options that are available and if there are any additional fees because of that.
And then just to be clear, that self-directed 401k is also a tax advantaged brokerage account.